I took a drag from my cigarette and thought that this was the first pleasure of the evening. Sex with Tommy couldn't be counted as a plus in today's list of pleasures. One thought kept pounding in my head. It wasn't worth it. Not worth spending the night outside my sanctuary, outside the walls of my bedroom. I never sleep in other people's bedrooms. It's been that way since childhood. I don't like the night and those who come with it. All those entities. I'm like a magnet for them, and only my home can protect me. I lost control of myself. Damn pills, damn Tommy. Why did I agree to go with him? I'm so tired of keeping control. I just wanted to relax and forget who I was, even if just for one night. He seemed so sweet that, without much thought, I agreed on our second date to go to his family's country house. Tommy said it was a mansion they inherited from his late grandmother. He wasn't very close to her, only mentioning that by the end of her life, she had completely lost her mind. She constantly prayed and muttered about the darkness that followed her everywhere. Ironically, we met on the day of her death. I didn't like the house from the start. It felt like it was waiting for us. This dark, gloomy monstrosity loomed over us like a cliff. It was already dark when we arrived, but in the moonlight I could see the cracks splitting the walls and the broken windows in some of the mansion's windows. The house was surrounded by an overgrown garden, its trees slowly reclaiming the territory. A few trees grew right at the main entrance. The general decay and gloominess filled me with anxiety even before stepping inside, but my mind was clouded by the anticipation of pleasure. So I pushed my intuition aside and boldly stepped into the dark maw of the house. I shivered from the cold. Tommy had taken all the blankets and was sleeping soundly, feeling accomplished. But I couldn't sleep. The creaks of the house and the moonlight streaming through the window kept me awake. Well, if that's the case, I decided to get dressed and look around to see where I had ended up tonight. Now that the fog of drugs had cleared from my head, my sobriety and caution began to return. But so did the anxiety, and the feeling of something terrible being inevitable gripped my mind. In this house, I felt trapped. I needed to figure out how to get out of here as quickly as possible and return to the safety of my home. Only there could they not see me or find me. I put on my boots and walked to the window. Now I understood the reason for the unbearable cold. The window was open. I struggled to close it. The wooden frame was warped, and just as I was about to step away, I saw a silhouette in the moonlight outside. My first instinct was to wake Tommy, but when I looked again, there was no one there. Just my imagination, I reassured myself. I drew the heavy curtains, plunging the bedroom into complete darkness. But my fear of the dark was nothing compared to my fear of the moonlight. I don't like the moon, the eternal companion of the night. I'm a magnet for entities, and it's their beacon. Its cold light unnerves me and fills me with panic. I looked around. My eyes gradually adjusted to the dark, and I could make out some details of the bedroom. The bed we had recently tumbled in was of colossal size, standing in the center of the room. Even though Tommy was almost 2 meters tall, he seemed lost in that monstrosity. The bed itself gave me thoughts of a ritual altar. Slowly, I began to feel my way toward the bedroom door. Next to the door stood a dresser. It was also quite large, though clearly smaller than the bed. I stopped and tried to examine a small painting above the dresser. It was a reproduction of a church icon depicting some saint. Next to it hung an old crucifix. Standard decor for an old, crazy grandmother, I thought. Finally, I reached the door. Strangely, Tommy had closed it earlier. Now it was wide open. Beyond it stretched a corridor dark as a tunnel into the abyss. I needed to take a step and cross the threshold. I nervously licked my lips. My mouth was dry. From somewhere deep in my mind, an old, sticky fear of the dark crept in. Run. I need to run away from here. This thought, like a bird in a cage, fluttered in my head. I glanced back at the bed where Tommy was sleeping, and I froze in horror. In the moonlight, yes, the curtains were open again, a dark creature sat on Tommy's chest. I tried to breathe, but instead I let out something like a mouse's squeak. The creature turned its head and stared straight at me. I didn't need much time to take it in. It felt like this thing was made of some black, semi-liquid substance that absorbed any light that touched it. Its bottomless black eyes stared right at me, and deep within them burned a fire, the fire of hell. In a split second, I was already running down the dark corridor, telling myself not to look back. I could feel, I knew, the creature was chasing me. Ahead was a door. Without thinking, I opened it and jumped into some room. In the dark, I fumbled for the lock and closed the door from the inside. The sound of dripping water. It was the bathroom. And in the bathroom, the light switch was inside. I found it. A miracle. I had light. Bright light flooded the bathroom, and under its influence, my fear began to subside. But then I heard a hiss, and gray smoke began seeping through the vent, taking the shape of some creature. I jumped into the bathtub and grabbed the shower head. Why? I don't know, but it was the only thing that came to mind. The creature raised its head and looked at me. But it wasn't a hellish being of darkness and oblivion, an old woman. It was just the ghost of a naked old woman. Phew, she scared me. I know these kinds of beings and don't fear them. They're always bothering me with their unfinished business. They had a whole life, yet they still didn't manage to do everything. To hell with them. It's not my problem. I started to leave the bathroom, cursing the ghost under my breath. And then the ghost of the grandmother spoke. Sweetie, I'm sorry for scaring you. I just love Tommy so much, and I also really love alcohol. And when you came today with the fumes of my favorite drink, I couldn't resist. I just sat on my beloved grandson's chest and breathed in the unforgettable scent of alcohol. And when I breathe in alcohol, I look like a creature of darkness. It's my punishment for my sins. So please don't be afraid or upset. I never meant to harm Tommy. He's my beloved grandson. You and Tommy have a wonderful future together. A family, children, this house. Go back to him. Her words dispelled my fear like morning rays scattering the night fog. I nodded and was about to leave when she spoke again. Wait, dear. There's a crucifix and an icon of St. Christopher in the room. Take them down, please, even if you just hide them in the dresser. Because of my sin, I'm uncomfortable with them in this house. And I can't leave the house. You know how it is. You have a home too. Do this, and I'll watch over you and Tommy. I didn't answer her, but simply returned to the bedroom. But before lying down next to Tommy, I walked over to the dresser. I ran my hand over the crucifix, then took it and the icon and carelessly tossed them into the dresser drawer. On the wall, only the faint outline of the crucifix and the rectangle where the icon had hung remained. They'd been there a long time. Apparently, the grandmother really was religious. So why did they bother her ghost? I wondered. But I didn't have time to think about it, as a second later, I was sound asleep, tightly hugging Tommy. I woke up to a strange, nauseatingly sweet smell and the sound of something chewing nearby. For a second, I closed my eyes. The moonlight streamed freely through the bedroom windows again. I turned my head toward Tommy. His one eye stared lifelessly at me, while the other was being chewed by the hellish creature sitting on his chest. Bloody strands of his eye hung from its mouth. It turned its head toward me, opened its maw, and let out a terrifying roar. Its paw pressed me down onto the bed, and I felt a sharp pain as my stomach was torn open. Something warm and sticky flowed down my thighs, and in my face shone the milky moon. This time, it helped me. Its cold light helped me see everything and remember my end. And in my head, I heard a grave whisper. "We've been waiting for you. We've found you. Now you're ours forever."